Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to today's webinar on the topic Making African-Led Solutions Work for the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, Equitable Development and Peaceful Coexistence, also called the GERD. All protocols are hereby observed. Now, without a doubt, IPSS believes open dialogues are critical to navigate, address, and resolve some, if not all, of the continent's contentions through peaceful means using African-led solutions. Today's webinar is just one of many such similar planned webinars that we'll be implementing here at IPSS. And we look forward to fruitful discussions and recommendations thereof. That being said, without wasting time, I'll now hand over to the moderator, Dr. Jonas Adeto, to lead us into the business of the day. Dr. Adeto is also the IPSS director. Dr. Adeto, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, distinguished guests, the finest minds of Africa. Thank you so much indeed for this attempt of creating African epistemology that is making African philosophy, African knowledge, African approach, African solutions work for all African conflicts and security landscape that today we are facing. I'm so delighted to be honest, honorables, dignitaries, excellencies, of course, all protocols observed, to see you today, particularly surviving in this testing and taxing time, which not only against one nation or ethnic group, but entire human species. So I'm so delighted that we are alive and looking at each other. Thank God Almighty, thank Allah indeed. Thank you so much once again for devoting your most precious resource, time, and of course energy, and most important again, be willing to engage in these extremely timely and topical issues. You might be asking a question. This is what we call speaker's credibility. Who are we going to listen to? And of course, these are the finest minds of this continent and of course global, I would say. We have His Excellency Ambassador Mike, who is the coordinator in the AU Mediation Support Unit, Peace and Security Department of African Union, AU Commission particularly. We have Dr. Mr. Abdul Mohammed, former Chief of Staff, High Implementation Panel for the Horn of Africa, African Union. We have Professor Omar, I'm sure I can see him, he is straight away here, who's been also a visiting professor at IPSS, and of course at large, he's been working a lot on Africa, in particular this area of security, global security, and representative of the Fenty Polisario at the United Nations, New York, visiting, remember, a researcher at the UNESCO Chair of Philosophy for Peace, Universitat Joan, and in Spain, member of the Inter-University Institute for Social Development and Peace, IUDESP, and Universitat Jaume, that is in Kesselin, Spain, and Elisa Jobson, our long time partner and at the same time colleague, who is currently Director, Africa Regional Advocacy International Crisis Group, and of course, last and one of most important, Dr. Jacob Arsana, who has been time and again, of course, very much associated and synonymous with hydrology and Abai or Nile, an associate professor at Political Science International Department of Addis Ababa University. These are the people, these are very with rich empirical as well as practical understanding and theoretical basis, very sound theoretical basis to speak on making African-centered solution work for the great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam or Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, short abbreviated as GERD. The focus is on equitable development and peaceful coexistence. Great, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again. So I will now call upon to start off with His Excellency Ambassador Mike. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Dr. Jonas, Ambassador is not yet in.
I can
Shall we proceed to the next speaker?
Yes, that is a beauty of speaking in absentia, particularly that's the new normal. When we are communicating in online, we assume that people are there. So I think we are practicing. So congratulations to all of us that we are living in such a new way of living on this planet. So then I would go to Professor Sidi Omar. Professor, hopefully you are there. If my reading is correct, I can say it there, the name there. Hello, Professor? Maybe could be experiencing some difficulties in connecting, but definitely I saw the name just popped up. So I'll then go straight to go to.
Sorry.
Yes.
I think he's on mute.
Yes. Could you please unmute yourself?
Absolutely. You're right.
Yes.
So good morning. Can you hear me?
Indeed. Yes.
Well, thank you. Good morning to all of you. And thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's always a pleasure to go back again, even virtually, to IPS and to Ethiopia, that great country. And I'm pleased to join this forum and to looking forward to exchange with these bright minds. I was told that we do not have much time to engage in this issue, so I will limit myself to about the 10 minutes time limit. And I'm sure that on the panel, many people have experience on technical issues. So what I'm going to do is to look at the issue from the perspective of the United Nations, where I'm based myself, and to relate that to the African Union efforts to deal with primarily an African issue. And I'm saying this because, as you may have seen, parties to this trilateral dispute have referred the matter to the Security Council of the United Nations, that we all know as the primary responsible for maintaining peace and security as per the United Nations Charter. And we also know the obligations incumbent on member states of the United Nations to have the UN Charter as the main source of their obligations. But this is the technical or the procedure part of it. So briefly speaking, as you can see, for instance, Egypt referred the matter frequently to the Security Council as a matter that may pose potential threat to international peace and security, which was not and continues not to be the position of Ethiopia, that insists on limiting and dealing with the matter within the context of the African Union. I think this is the subject of today, how to deal with African issues within the context of the African Union. And I think the agreement in principle by the main parties in late July by the second extraordinary meeting of the AU Assembly Bureau, and their commitment, the commitment to an African Union-led process. And I think this is the main issue here, how to ensure that the parties genuinely commit to an African Union-led process. Because I can understand that it is not an easy issue, it's complex, it has regional and international ramifications, but to what extent are we able within the African Union to deal with our issues? The African Union Constitutive Act is very clear on this, and the Declaration of Principles, even signed by the three parties, is very clear on this, to deal with any issues by consultations and mediation, and it does not. The 2015 Declaration of Principle does not give room for any party to nationalize the issue. And I think this is what part of the problem that I wanted to deal with, is how the parties, or some of them, try to internationalize the issue, thus limiting the room for the African Union and for Africa to deal with one of its major issues, which is, as you all understand, I mean, the whole project and its consequences on the parties involved. So back to the main point, and I think I put this on the table. To what extent are we, within the African Union context, able to deal with issues that have a regional and international ramifications? Do we have the tools in place to deal with these issues? Taking into account the fact that as I said before, the member states of the African Union are also members of the United Nations. They have obligation towards that organization and its principal organs. In this case, particularly the Security Council. And because the point I would like to finish on, and it's a matter of all of those dealing with conflicts, it's a question relating to perceptions. How do the three parties perceive a conflict, and thus the possibilities for dealing with? Is it a regional a conflict that could be resolved within the regional structures, or there's a need to go beyond the regional structures and involve third parties, in this case the United Nations, the United States of America, or the European Union? So if that's okay, Mr. Moderator, I will leave it at this, putting this on the table, and I'll be looking forward to engaging with any questions or comments that may arise during our conversations. Thank you very much again for the invitation.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor. That's absolutely excellent and insightful. That's great. I'm sure I will not attempt to do any summary of it because we will have time to deliberate on that when we come back to the discussion session. Now I'll go straight to, if Elisa Jepson is there. Elisa?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just going to try and put my video on.
Excellent.
It might not hold, but I'll see what I can do.
No worries. Thank
you.
So
just wanted to echo the thanks to IPSS for the invitation, and also for holding an event on this issue, which I think has, well, it's certainly been taking up quite a lot of our time at International Crisis Group, and you know, I think it's an issue that's definitely been in the news recently. So Crisis Group has been following developments closely for years now in relations to the Nile Waters dispute. We put out a report in 2019, quite a comprehensive report, trying to analyse the views of the different parties, looking at the sort of regionalisation, and also looking at the of the Gulf in issue, and systems of a steady stream of shorter publications looking for ways to keep the parties at the table and to bring them to reach a consensus. I personally sort of first became aware of the GERD when travelling to Addis Ababa as a journalist in the early 2010s. In order to get a visa, I had to meet the press secretary at the London Embassy, and on every visit was told about the GERD, and was usually sent away with a handful of glossy booklets on the dam, extolling the virtues of the dam. And you know, so that for me really highlighted the importance of the dam to Ethiopia. And you know, I think it's key to sort of think about what the dam means to both Egypt and Ethiopia. Both of them, it's an existential issue. You know, Egypt relies heavily on the Nile waters for its water needs, and Ethiopia needs the electricity generated by the Nile to improve economic development. It also raises very strong sentiments in both countries. The issue is tied to national pride and to national identity. It's also a key issue in domestic politics. Both President Sisi and Prime Minister Abiy would face considerable domestic opposition if they were perceived to have made too many concessions during these negotiations on the Nile. And given the highly politically charged nature of the Nile's waters dispute, and the fact also that it wasn't invited to engage. The AU has previously stayed away from the GERD dispute. I think what changed was the possibility that the UN Security Council was going to intervene in the issue. And from crisis group perspective, I mean, we definitely feel that that recourse to the UN Security Council is not really warranted. You know, whilst the issue is could cause serious tensions between the parties. You know, our assessment is that it's not really likely to lead to sort of a real conflict, a hot conflict. So I think, you know, the fact that the UN Security Council was going to have a discussion and that the matter was being referred to the Security Council, I think provoked the African Union, moved them to act. And I think, you know, this possibly wouldn't have happened without President Ramaphosa at the helm. Prime Minister Abiy had spoken to Ramaphosa about having a role on the GERD previously. He's a strong believer, well, South Africa's strong believer in African solutions, and also, you know, the Bureau of the Assembly, the Bureau of Heads of State, had been meeting regularly on COVID, so it was easy to turn the discussion to the GERD. I just want to make an aside here on the Bureau, because it seems to me that this is the perhaps the evolution of a new peace and security body within the African Union. I mean, previously this group had really been more of a technical group focused on the running of summits. It got a bit of a boost during the Kagame reform process, where, you know, the troika of current, incoming and outgoing chairs of the assembly was established, and, you know, it was given a sort of a slightly bigger, slightly more political role. It really came into its own this year under COVID, with COVID-19, you know, meeting regularly to discuss the issue, and, you know, trying to find ways to help the continent through the pandemic. And I think because the Bureau was meeting regularly, and, you know, meeting regularly at the heads of state level, it was possible for it to turn to this particular peace and security issue. And as I said, you know, the fact that Ramaphosa was at the helm, is that his current chair had been engaged in discussions on GERD before with Abiy, meant that, you know, that he was well positioned to use the Bureau for this peace and security issue. And I think, I mean, if we have time, I think it'd be interesting later to sort of explore maybe, you know, how this new body, or the body acting in a new way, can help find African solutions to African problems. You know, whether this its importance will continue when President Ramaphosa steps down. What does it mean for the Peace and Security Council, which I think in recent years has lost some of its confidence and maybe some of its authority on peace and security. That said, though, I think it would have been very difficult for the Peace and Security Council to have engaged on this with both Egypt and Ethiopia as members. So I think at the moment, you know, we're in a fairly positive position. We could have seen a real serious rise of tensions when Ethiopia began filling. I mean, you know, they've actually very quickly managed to reach the level needed that they were hoping to store this year. You know, and so we at Crisis Group we're expecting, and, you know, we're sort of trying to sound the drum about the fact that you know, that there was potential for a serious escalation in diplomatic tensions when Ethiopia began filling the dam. I mean, as I said, that hasn't happened, partly due to nature. I mean, the rains came early and they've been fairly abundant, but also I think partly due to the fact that Egypt is also currently preoccupied with events in Libya, preparing to send troops, and, you know, maybe didn't really want to be fighting on two fronts, diplomatically speaking. The talks are making incremental progress, which is good. Sudan is playing an instrumental role here with providing solutions, and critically, the parties are staying at the table. I mean, we've seen that these negotiations have been very stop-start over the last decade, pretty much, and it's good to see that there is some consistent focus that the parties are staying at the table. So while much has been agreed as well, there are three really key outstanding issues which have not been, and they're not easy to reach agreement on. These are the drought mitigation during prolonged dry spells, dispute resolution mechanism. So, if the parties reach an agreement, how are they going to resolve disputes further down the line, and the question of whether or not this agreement is legally binding. These are incredibly difficult issues to resolve, but they are solvable. But they're not going to be solvable overnight. So I think what I want to do now is sort of turn to one of the objectives of this meeting, which is to come up with practical recommendations for how to keep the mediation on track. And as I said, this is going to be a long process. So I've got 5 recommendations, and I'll just quickly go through them. The first one, I think, is to keep the heads of state engaged. There are key technical, hydrological, and legal issues, as I just described, that need to be resolved. But really, at the heart of this problem, it's a political one. And to keep the negotiations on track, we need to have the discussions between the 3 leaders of the 3 countries involved: Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. And I think the good thing that we've seen about this particular intervention from the African Union, and perhaps which has been maybe missing more recently, is the engagement of the heads of state. That it was an intervention from Ramaphosa and the rest of the bureau at that level that managed to sort of bring the parties back to the table and get them talking, and is managing to keep them at the table. And I think that's got to be essential, keeping the 3 heads of state engaged. Second, if we're going to keep this mediation on track, the AU has to understand that they need to commit for the long haul. This is going to be a marathon; it's not a sprint. What happens? And the question here is, what is going to happen after Ramaphosa steps down as chair in January? Will the incoming chair, President Tshisekedi of the DRC, have the bandwidth and the stature to continue this process? So I think, that now is the time for the African Union to be looking at how it can sustain its commitment longer term. And this may be a need to sort of set up a high-level committee dedicated to this, and headed by Ramaphosa. I think the third key issue that the talks need to address is building trust. This is a really key missing ingredient, and this lack of trust is on all sides, and it's partly rooted in the 1959 treaty between Egypt and Sudan that allocated the use of the Nile's waters to those 2 countries alone. And Ethiopia has seen these arrangements as preventing it from using the Blue Nile to catalyze its own economic development. So it's important, I think, on all sides, that trust is built, and that's going to be a tricky thing. But I think, again, and it goes back to engaging with the heads of state. We need to keep the heads of state at the table to try and build this trust. Fourth, I think, more broadly in the longer term, this issue is only really going to be resolved with a wider basin discussion, a compact to ensure better management of the Nile waters. This is difficult for Egypt to accept, but the likelihood of water stress in years to come means that this is really essential. And I think the African Union, perhaps with the Nile Basin Initiative, is well placed to sort of move the discussions to try and bring about a basin-wide agreement. Finally, my fifth point is to the international community, especially the US. The international community needs to get behind this African Union initiative. It is making progress. It is, the progress is incremental, but we are seeing it. And beyond that, many actors have significant influence with the three riparian countries, and they should help keep them at the table. The US, China, the EU, Gulf states, and Turkey all can play a role in encouraging the parties to show flexibility and abandon maximalist positions. I think that the AU has stepped in at the right time in this. It's been sort of serendipitous, I think, but it has stepped in at the right time. It is making agreement, and it is demonstrating, at least for the time being, that that African solutions can work. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
I can't thank you enough, Liz, to be honest with you. That is absolutely eye-opening. And thank you so very much indeed for that extremely interesting, informative, and engagement itself. And aside, not again summarize, but we'll have more time to interact together. Now, finally, I'm going to call upon Professor Jacob Arsano, who has been instrumental in both not only making the knowledge of hydropolitics work for global understanding, but also he himself got involved in the very negotiation itself. So time is to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jonas. I am very much pleased to be part of this discussion this morning. The subject under discussion is extremely important, and that the knowledge and perceptive exchange of notes from this discussion will help each of us, and also help the direction of the ongoing negotiation under the auspices of the AU, and especially the AU chairman, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, which is handling excellently. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is not a single dam which has come down out of the blues, but it is one of the several dams in Egypt, in Sudan, and in Ethiopia. This dam may be special because of the attention it has drawn, and that is because of its size. Nevertheless, the Ethiopian government from the very beginning has been very transparent in revealing the process, the mechanism, the design, and the plan, and also the conduct of the construction of the dam. In this regard, this dam has been very much in the light of the Egyptian and Sudanese experts and the government, as much as it has been in the Ethiopian experts and the government. So the basic principle of use management of the water resources in the Nile Basin, as it is elsewhere in the world, is to follow the UN Convention principles, especially the principle which is a real basic one, that is equitable and reasonable utilization of water resources together or in each country, in keeping with the not causing significant harm. So these principles are cardinal, they are repeated, and everybody really refers to these principles. But the dam in Ethiopia, as far as I know, through a lot of participations in the in academic discourses, in the negotiations, and also in public, as well as in second track diplomacy on this issue. So the dam is aimed to relieve the Ethiopian fast growing population from poverty and to help Ethiopia's economic development first and foremost. And there is also a very important articulation as part of this dam, that the dam is being built in a geographic area where water conservation is the benefit of this dam, and the downstream countries can also use the benefit of this dam from regulated flow and from the other benefits like the clean energy this dam will produce when it is completed, and when the electric power could be distributed through various mechanisms, including in the neighboring countries. So this dam, therefore, is significant for Ethiopia, and also possibly, and actually, it will happen to Egypt and to Sudan. Behind this dam, there have been a lot of interactions in the Nile Basin. Just to mention the most recent ones are the Nile 2002 conferences. Those happened for 20 years in each of the Nile Basin countries, and all the Nile Basin governments, non-government organizations, universities, private organizations, international agencies participated in exchanging views, sharing knowledge about how to utilize, manage, protect, and conserve water resources in each country and across the basin. It was a very helpful format where a lot of knowledge has been obtained. I think in all countries, certainly in Ethiopia, it was a highly beneficial format where a lot of knowledge was obtained. And then Nile Basin Initiative was one of the very important activity which was taken on by all Nile Basin countries and supported by all meaningful government communities, especially big countries like the United States, Canada, Russia, Japan, and name it. So the Nile Basin Initiative brought together all the Nile Basin countries and experts, as well as the government officials, worked together how to best make use of the Nile Basin for each country and all the countries in the basin. Another process which was actually parallel to Nile Basin Initiative was the negotiation for cooperative framework agreement, which was negotiated again for 11 years. And it was really rich, interactive process, and finally that process did not come to a final completion because Egypt and Sudan withdrew from this process, only for a simple thing that this negotiation and the documents which were formulated in the Cooperative Framework Agreement did not include the historical and natural and exclusive rights of Egypt and Sudan, because Egypt and Sudan really emphasized to maintain the letter and the spirit of the 1959 agreement, which was in fact allocated the entire Nile waters from Egypt and Sudan. So the title of the agreement itself was, unfortunately, the full utilization of the water resources between the two countries. The rest of the Nile Basin country would not accept this, and instead they insisted that the future water agreement should be open for all countries to manage, utilize, protect, and conserve the water resources of the Nile Basin in the interest of all countries and the communities in each country. Then there was in Eastern Nile Basin the multi-purpose project process where Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia were in the center. That happened, for some 5-6 years, and finally again, Egypt withdrew from that process. Then there was a negotiated agreement in 2015, which was signed in Khartoum by the leaders of the three countries. This was actually to agree on how to fill and operate the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So this is the agreement on the basis of which Ethiopia has been planning and projecting how to fill the dam in such a way the water flow to downstream countries will not in any substantive way decrease, so that the downstream countries would go without their needs for water. So now I think the dispute and the negotiation continued even after the 2015 agreement on declaration of principles on the filling and operation of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The current process of negotiation is really interesting because it takes on the technical aspect, the legal aspect, and of course the political aspect, where countries work together in order, to continue together, prosper together, and protect themselves against any kind of, unnecessary conflicts in the future, as a matter of utilization, management, protection, and conservation of the Nile water resources, which is so vital for each country. And this process has been dragged left and right, unfortunately, by the Egyptian side, including to take it to forum out of Africa, out of the three countries, and that has been now brought back to Africa. And Ethiopia's role in proposing and supporting and diplomatically working hard to bring the process of this negotiation to the auspices of the AU. And I think it is a very positive, and it is in the tradition of the African Union from the time of liberation movement and so on, to take Africa's issues, Africa's problems, matters that is very important for Africa, to bring it to the African forum. And this is one of the examples. I hope that this process will succeed and will become another stage in the development, in capacity, and in the willingness of the African countries, the leaders, the negotiating ones, and those who are observing and facilitating. This is going to be a showcase for the world that Africa is really capable to do the matters that arise in Africa and to help and solve problems bigger or smaller than the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So I am also very much hopeful that the remaining technical issues will be hammered out and the legal issues will be framed correctly and in such a way that the three countries are happy and the three countries are not pushed around. Again, I think the right of Ethiopia, like any other country in the Nile Basin or elsewhere, to develop its resources, especially water resources, without causing significant harm to others, will be acceptable, and this will be really something that will be realized in the recent future. So with this, thank you, Mr. Moderator, for this opportunity, and I hope I will attend questions when they arise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, indeed, as usual, for deep and broad explanation, and at the same time, of course, linking it with what's going on today as the ongoing solution discussion itself. Thank you. Before I open the discussion forum, let me just ask three questions to three prominent speakers here. We, of course, don't have those two people who couldn't make today, so we may not, of course, debate about that. But just let me come back to three of you. As you can see, equitable development and peaceful coexistence is our subtopic, which is based on equitable share of resources, and at the same time living peacefully, plus without making any damage significantly, which is of course part of international principle, as Professor Jacob had clearly articulated. In terms of that, particularly in terms of this subtopic, what should be done from those three parties? And the second one, if we just make reference to Declaration of Principles of 2015, the three countries agreed upon in relation to, again, this very topic that we have deliberated. What do you think the three countries plus in terms of African solution could be done? And finally, the lessons for upper riparian countries. The lessons. Now, Ethiopia has failed this first stage, but what type of signal does it also send for the rest of the Nile partners? And I'll come back to a chat room question which is posed for you, but let's invite any one of you can speak. If you want, Professor, you can start. Then I'll go to Lisa and finally to Professor Sidi. Yes, Dr. Jacob, if you want, you can start. In terms of the yes.
Yeah, okay. There is a heavy rain pouring outside. I'm not sure I heard all what you have said, Dr. Jonas, but I thought you were asking about the lessons for other upstream countries when the process of the negotiation of this dam is still going on. I think, generally speaking, I've been looking into several river basins in Africa, namely Senegal, Niger, Zambezi, the Nile itself, and in Asia, Indus, Valley, Mekong in America, the Colombia and Colorado, and so on and so on. You see, I think generally speaking, each river basin is a unique, has a unique situation in terms of population, in terms of riparian countries, in terms of the environmental, geographical, and so on situations, in terms of history of that river basin. When we come to the Nile Basin, it's really interesting that this longest river takes on 11 countries along itself. And these 11 countries have been really, like I mentioned, negotiating, through several phases to understand what is the best for them, which means how the upstream countries develop their water resources and how the downstream countries develop their water resources, and how both upstream and downstream countries benefit from the water resources they share. So the best thing is that both upstream and downstream countries should sit together and formulate, a framework. Now, in the Nile Basin situation, we have a already formulated document, which is known as Cooperative Framework Agreement. This agreement needs to be completed in terms of final ratification and so on. And this agreement is, the basis for the countries to come together at the basin level, that each country benefits to the maximum, and each country, is obliged to use the water resources in the best efficient manner in terms of protecting and conserving the water resources, so that others have the chance also to utilize. So now we are at the beginning stage to go into that process. But in the future, we are going to, go to that level where the Nile Basin level formats will be revisited, and countries come back with better understanding and better, strength, better empathy, that these water resources can be shared by every country and in the best possible way. I think that is the situation whereby the upstream and downstream countries equally benefit, or equitably benefit, and they will be satisfied, because that will be reasonable and that will be useful for the prospect and the prosperous future of their countries. If I did not hear other questions, maybe I'll come back, but this is how I understood your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. It definitely hits the nail on the head. Can I come to Professor Sidi Muhammad Omar Abdallah to add on to those questions, particularly focusing on the subtopic, the focus is on equitable development and peaceful coexistence, which is based on international water or transboundary resource use altogether. So could you just have on that any comment you'd like to make?
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, I think the main question. But the way I see it as the ultimate goal of the ongoing process is to come up with a comprehensive agreement that ensures this equitable development of this transboundary resource, and of course to lay the foundations of a peaceful coexistence. So I see it as part and parcel of the process, but this is what we hope to be at the end when this political process comes to a good conclusion. If you would just allow me to touch very briefly on some of the pertinent points raised by the previous speakers, particularly a colleague from International Crisis Group on these 5 points. But I would just focus on 3 of them. And I entirely agree on the fact that we need to ensure that the process is going ahead, not only because of South African President Ramaphosa is in the lead. And in this case, And I've seen this is almost the literature, and we agree on that we need a AEU-led process. But I also would add, not only an AEU-led process, but AEU wholly owned process. And by that I mean that should not be tied up to a particular chairperson and so on and so forth. But what we need is to have the African Union with its relevant policy structures, the Peace and Security Council, the Commission itself as part of this process. And that, I think, what will ensure its continuance beyond the incoming or outgoing chairperson. And when we talk about the role of international community, and I see and foresee a role, but I would say that we need the international community to contribute and help in this process for the good reasons, not the wrong reasons. And by that I mean not to leave a room for the parties, or at least some of them, to engage third parties, not to help move the process forward, but to leverage their position in the process. And this is what I started talking about the Security Council role in this, and the United Nations as Percy. So just to wrap up, I think what we need is a process led and owned by the African Union. And this is obviously the translation, practical translation for an African solution or mechanism for dealing with African issues. And when there's a deal, and hopefully soon, as I've seen our speakers being expressing hope that we could, the parties could strike a deal soon. When that process comes to a conclusion, then at that point, we could engage third partners, be it the United Nations, or the United States, or the African Union, Russia, China, and so forth, to accompany the process and then contribute financially or materially to it. But to mix the two processes, I think this is part of this very complex. And as I said in my preliminary observations, focusing on what role the Security Council of the United Nations has in this. And I personally says, and I hope that I've made my point very clear, the internationalization of this issue has only made it more difficult. All parties concerned, taking into account the fact that Ethiopia is completely against the internationalization of this issue, while Egypt thinks that it is an issue that has to do with international peace and security. And so back again to your question, the moderator, indeed, a comprehensive agreement would be conducive to ensuring equitable development. But for us to get there, I think this is what we, as I said before, we need an African Union owned and led process in which all the parties concerned engage genuinely with these objectives in mind. And when that deal is struck, then the African Union could, or the parties concerned, can lean on the international community to implement and to accompany this process. And at the end, again, I see it as another test to our organization, and there are many issues at stake, but that's for us to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor. Absolutely, that definitely is the corners or the foundation of our discussions as well. So I'll come to Elisa for your remarks before I move on to the audience questions. Yes, please. Okay,
thanks. I think on the question of a comprehensive agreement, we have to sort of understand what we mean by that. So there's, you know, and what the parties mean by that as well. So I think at the moment when we're talking about a comprehensive agreement, it's about an agreement on the filling and operation of the GERD. I think what we really need for equitable development is a broader deal on the Nile Basin involving all 11 riparian states. And you know, any deal must protect the rights of all states, including the sort of two most upstream states, Sudan and Egypt. So, you know, I think we're going to be looking to have, if we're going to have equitable development, then there needs to be a broader discussion about how the Nile waters more generally can be used. And as I said earlier, I think this is something that the African Union can engage on in cooperation with the Nile Basin Initiative. You also asked about the Declaration of Principles. I mean, I think many of the declarations of principles actually, will lead us to equitable development and peaceful coexistence. There's one principle is the development of regional integration and sustainability, the principle of not causing significant damage, the principle of fair and appropriate use. This all speaks to to equity. And I think one thing is really worth pointing out is that the GERD can be win-win for all parties. Ethiopia will be generating electricity, which it can also sell to Sudan and Egypt at at subsidized rates. Sudan itself stands to benefit from the flow, the more controlled flow of the Nile. And Egypt, if it has an agreement and can come to an agreement, then it will have a better understanding of how Ethiopia is using the Nile waters, and be better able to monitor its own use. And there are also opportunities for economic integration as well between the three countries. So I think, as I said, the Declaration of Principles, as it's set out, does link very closely to the sub theme of this meeting. And then finally, you said lessons for upper riparian states. I mean, and this has been, this is kind of at the heart of this of the question and of the dispute between Ethiopia and Egypt, is the example that the GERD sets for other riparian states and their ability to utilize the dams, the Nile's waters. I mean, I think what we should learn is that any project, any forthcoming project, there needs to be much more cooperation between the whole basin in order to ensure that we don't end up with the controversies that we've had with this with the GERD.
Lisa, thank you so very much. And that's absolutely fantastic. There are so many questions already on the chat. If I just take one or two from here, particularly Walid Alam, thanks for the speakers and their valuable interventions. Could we have more clarifications on the future use of the Blue Nile issues, and what kind of use will it be? Hydropower also, or for irrigation and agriculture? That is Walid Alam. Boniface Mwaka says negotiation on Nile water should be broad-based, not just 3 states. Exclusion of other riparian states negates equitable and sustainable use of transborder resources. And of course, there are many others comments, but if you could just comment on this, then I'll invite people to speak. There are a lot of questions I might like to summarize while you are answering these 2 questions, Walid's and Boniface. You can go in any direction you like, in any order. Anyone, you can just come in. I can see Professor Jacob. Unmute, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Jonas. Yes, I think here are 2 issues. The Nile Basin belongs to the 11 countries, and each segment, each stage in the downstream and upstream must be looked at as one system. This is the first thing. So the overall Nile Basin development should concern all the 11 countries. When it comes to the tributaries, for example, Abai, which is called Blue Nile in Sudan, or Takkaza, which is called Atbara in Sudan, Baro Akobo, which is called Sobat in Sudan. These branches or these tributaries, they can be developed between the countries which immediately share them. For example, the current Abai Dam, which is Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, is on the river that comes out of Ethiopia. It is the largest, water flow in the Nile Basin. It's 49 billion cubic meters a year on average. And it comes out of Ethiopia, having more than a dozen tributaries that flows out to Sudan and then joins the Nile and goes to Egypt. So the three countries are concerned certainly on the water flow of Abai, but these three countries have to really understand what is the best kind of use in each of these countries, what is the best method of protecting the water resources, what is the best mechanism of conserving the water resources. Now, building a dam is also a mechanism of conserving water resources in the case of Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So this dam captures 74 billion cubic meters of water when it is completed, but it conserved a lot of water in the canyon. And because of the low heat rate in Ethiopia, there is a very little evaporation rate also. So which means there is added water flow that goes out of Ethiopia to Sudan and Egypt. This is a big plus for Ethiopia in terms of developing the water resources, for Sudan and Egypt in terms of conserving the water resources. This can really be compared with the Aswan Dam, which is wide open in the scorching heat, where it loses more than 10 billion cubic meters of water every year. So this comparative understanding in the future development of water resources is really very important. Coming to the upstream of the GERD, so the upstream of the GERD is in the western heartland of Ethiopia, where there's a huge number of population and where there is a lot of traditional water-based activities in Ethiopia. This should continue, with the full understanding of equitable and reasonable use of these water resources, and with not intending or causing any significant harm to downstream within Abai in Ethiopia, in Sudan, or in Egypt. That's a matter of understanding, negotiating, and technically working out what mechanism should be followed. The upstream of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is where a lot of activities are already going on, traditionally, as well as with development dams or irrigation. So this cannot be prohibited, or Ethiopia cannot be told, or cannot be really prohibited from utilizing the water resources above the Grand Renaissance Dam. The only thing is that what kind of use, what mechanism of use, what benefit of that use, and what could be any significant harm it might cause in the downstream, within Ethiopia or in Sudan or in Egypt. Those are the things which would be really worked out in the design, in the construction, in the utilization, and so on and so on. I think the Ethiopian engineers and developers are quite capable from the experience of what they have been doing within Ethiopia. And also, I have a lot of belief that Sudanese and Egyptian experts are also very much knowledgeable on this. The only thing is that they have to really understand the politicians to understand the whole situation, of the water use management, protection and conservation. So these are the big things, but at the same time, I think we have to really be empathetic, and we have to be really broad-minded that these shared water resources must be shared in terms of their benefit and in terms of their future potential, not only in terms of one or two or three projects which are, now on the ground. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Professor Indy. That's a really sustainable basis for sustainable development and growth. And of course, the very foundation of African philosophy itself, because our being is defined through others' being as well. We should really grow together. So can I come to Lisa, please? Liz, I'll come also to you've got 2-3 questions from audience as well, but first, if you'd like to respond on this.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what the future uses of the Blue Nile will be, I mean, I think that's a question for the Ethiopian government. I mean, my understanding is that, Ethiopia has said that it doesn't intend to use the water for irrigation and agriculture. I think there's definitely possibility of building further hydropower facilities on the Blue Nile, but the whole thing about this aspect is it's not clear, what Ethiopia will build, and Ethiopia doesn't want to be straitjacketed by an agreement which prevents it from developing further installations or further using the Blue Nile water. And that, this is one of the issues that's at stake in these discussions. I think Egypt would like to see the further use would like to restrict the use of the word the Nile to the GERD, and Ethiopia would like to reserve the right to use the waters for other projects. And in terms of Boniface's comment on the I agree. I mean, we should eventually be looking at an agreement based on an agreement with all the riparian states, all 11 of them, because there has to be a basin-wide agreement. But I think before we can move to that, there has to be an agreement of some sort, at least on the period of filling and how the dam will operate during the period of filling. So, I think if we could reach an agreement on that, then it may be possible then to start thinking about having broader negotiations on a Nile Basin, wider Nile Basin agreement. Thanks.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. So, Professor Sidi Mohammed Anwar Abdallah. Yes. Yes. Hello, please.
Hello again.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much to say on this particular issue, but a question relating to what is next. And I think that all of us agree, and what's next is to continue the negotiation process. But again, I will have to insist that a framework within the African Union should be created in which all African Union stakeholders, institutions, including the Peace and Security Council and the Commission itself, should be involved. Because there's no way out of this except negotiations. I think we all agree on this. And it is up to the parties involved to engage in this process. No external party, whatever leverage or clout they may bring to the table, will induce any change in the perception of the problem itself and the potential solutions in technical, legal, and practical matters, except the parties themselves.
Very much indeed. And thank you for all speech. James Nyawa says, just following up the 5 points raised by Madam Elisa, My question on recommendation number 2, what past experience can the African Union draw on in resolving this transboundary dispute? That is James's question. If there is any precedence. And then Moa Lagerkantes asks, what is the next step with regards to the AU track? Do we know when the next set of negotiation will take place? I think that's quite a technical question, but I'm sure you will possibly come into it. The rest are comments, and I'll come back to them. Shall I start with Lisa herself before I move on to gentlemen? Lisa.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, on the question of what can the AU draw on, I mean, it has its own experience in boundary disputes. I mean, it's slightly different because this is about a river, but there is some expertise there that the African Union has on working with member states to resolve differences over boundaries. And I think, you know, the other thing that and Professor Jakob was discussing this was sort of looking at other basins and see how they've been developed. I think the Mana River is one, and there's a number of other basins that the AU can look at to see how water management and disagreements have been settled along that. On the question about next steps with regards to the AU track, I mean, someone may correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood that the technical negotiations had resumed. I think they resumed yesterday, and I mean, I think the plan is to sort of have another round of technical discussions and then take it back to the bureau. And I think, you know, that kind of process is essential. It keeps the parties on track. You know, having short deadlines. I mean, I'm not, as I say, I'm not entirely sure what the deadline is for this, but certainly the last round, I think, helped keep minds focused. You know, 2 weeks of negotiations, followed by a report to the bureau. If we can keep that momentum up, I think it's likely that, you know, we can make some incremental progress along that way. And as I said before, I think it's really essential that the heads of state, the heads of state of Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt remain consistently engaged, because we're not going to have a deal without a political agreement. Thanks.
Wonderful indeed. Can I come to Professor Sidi Mohammed, please? Professor Sidi, it's now to, yes, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, please.
Well, I kind of jumped ahead of the question that you've already commented on that in regards to the African Union. What is next? So I'll be waiting for another question or comment on it. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay. Professor Jakob, already you are in it, so this is pertinent for you to address, and also unmute your mic, then you can continue.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. The African experience, you know, on transboundary water development, Africa is very young, I would say. One of the best examples that I have personally visited and appreciated is the case of Senegal River Basin, where the development of the water resources in several uses, you know, from transportation to irrigation to hydropower and etc., between Senegal, Mali, Mauritania, and Guinea is really fascinating. It's a good one. If still that holds, I hope it holds, there is no visa requirement between the countries. It is because of you know, their optimal attempt to arrange how to best utilize the shared water resources. I'm sure this example is one way or another can be tapped by other countries in their own situations. SADC has been doing very well in terms of transboundary water resources in Southern Africa. We learned quite a lot from the SADC process. I think there are transboundary water situations in a few other cases in Africa, but all the cases are just evolving to make the shared water resources the best format, the best linkage, and the best organizing factor between the riparian states. So I'm sure in the Nile Basin, we'll go there. It has already started, like I mentioned, through various phases, which started with Nile 2002 conferences, which took for 10 years and which gathered a lot of experience, information, scientific research, and so on and so on. So I think this is something we can really mention about transboundary water development in Africa. If I can pick on Madam Eliza's fifth recommendation, the international support, she nicely mentioned countries like the US, European Union, China and other countries. Yes, their support is very important because of their leverage, because of their weight, and of course, because of their wealth. But we have to be cautioned. Some of the international biggies come along to places, where 2 or 3 countries negotiate with their resources and sometimes with their leverage to one or another side. This situation must be taken, with a pinch of salt. So I think they are welcome, they are useful, and we are part of the international community. But when they come, they must come without a real condition and with a leverage which sides one or another side. That is, I don't want to mention, some of the countries, how they would like to play in their own best interest rather than the best interest of the parties to the negotiation. So I think that we have to be a little bit careful and we have to watch. And also we have to explain that the countries in negotiation to be really relaxed, and they must be independent, and they must be providing the best of their knowledge and best of their analysis so that they can find their way around. Another point you raised, Mr. Moderator, or somebody mentioned the next process of negotiation. I'm not sure about the date of the next negotiation, but the second communique of the AU and the African Bureau, they said this will happen as soon as possible. So I think on Ethiopia's side, the negotiating teams and the government are waiting for the final date to be fixed. I think it is not going to be a long time from now. It's going to be very soon. Things are also moving very fast. Thank you, Dr. Jonas.
Thank you very much, Professor Jacob. Thank you so much indeed. I think I can see Lisa maybe wanting to add some points or maybe further clarify what she wanted to say.
Yes, I just wanted to add a point, well, to clarify something on the on my point about international engagement. We've got an AU-led process, and the AU should continue to lead this process. And really don't think, and I think it's useful to have to have the UN, the US and the EU as observers, but I'm not suggesting that they would take a bigger role than that. I think I agree completely that any parties engaging, external parties engaging in the talks or on the margins of the talks should be neutral. And I think, I mean, we have seen, particularly, I think that and with tweets that we've seen coming out of DC, that potentially the US is maybe not taking as neutral a stand as many would like to see it take. But if, in terms of the international engagement, you know, the main thing that international partners can do, I think, is get behind this AU-led initiative and ensure that it is the only initiative that's going forward. I mean, I think what we want to avoid is sort of having competing processes anywhere, which is why I think it's great that, you know, that the UN has stepped back when the AU stepped up. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. I can see a lot of very distinguished and high-level personalities here, such as Ambassador Matata and Salvatore Matata, and of course Professor Ababa, and many others really are there waiting. And I'll give them time. If they want, if they can ask or make comments using their voice, if not chat room. So I have got 2 chat room questions here. The first one from Lulsaged Ababa says, thank you for the presentations. The recommendation from crisis are good. As the negotiation is going to be a long process, don't you think that the AU and the Nile Basin initiatives should work hand in hand? From other river basin experience, basin-wide commission have played a prominent role on water management. Thus, the need to form NRBC, which Egypt is not willing to sign. That is just from one audience member. Another one is it fair for Egypt to mention those very old agreements or colonial agreements, such as that of 1929, 1959, or even 1902, while Egypt, the whole globe is in 2000, into 21st century? How rational, how amicable is it? And he said we would like to remain anonymous in his identification. Right, so shall I start with Professor Sidi? Hello, Professor Sidi.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Hello. Well, as we all know, I've said this before, I mean, we are dealing with a conflict where all parties have their own perceptions and narratives and history and feelings towards the situation. And as we know, what motivates people engaged in a certain conflict, be it violent or non-violent, is not facts, abstract facts, the way they feel, the way they approach this. So all this historical archive, sure, they're part and parcel of this very, very difficult process. But it is, I think, it's time of all this package to be unpacked actually as part of this. The question is to what extent this helps or not the process if Egypt, for example, in this case of Sudan, can invoke an agreement that one of the parties was not part of it, and it's not fee in relationship to it. So I don't think that this is for the negotiators to assess, but I don't think that the invoking this kind of historical facts in the ongoing process at the beginning at least will help, because that will only reinforce, as I said before, the perceptions of each parties. And what, of course, the ideal situation, as we all know, is that a process, an ongoing process, which will help the parties to rethink the relationship, because the ultimate goal, as you rightly, among other goals, of course, is to reach an equitable and mutually beneficiary and mutually agreed agreement that could deliver on the promises of development, collective development of this. But so I said, maybe at a later time of the process, agreements could be rethought. I don't see how feasible is that, but we should understand, all of us as external parties, at least those of us who have nothing to do with any personal stake in this conflict, that the 3 parties, We are dealing with a very complex process. It has its history, and that history plays a very good role, a key role in this, depending in the mood and the dynamics. The question is how to deal with that. So as I've seen in some comments, and it's even part of this ongoing debate on this, rethinking that agreement, Ethiopia is not bound by that, and so on and so forth. Egypt and Sudan insist on having that as part of this package. So again, in dealing with a very complex process as this, as any, by the way, social conflict, we have to have room, and this is, of course, for the people concerned and involved, have room for all these other issues that may pop up, part of the basis of these negotiations, and should not be seen as an obstacle for not to go beyond, because indeed those countries, or each country has its own position. But my hope is that I and agree on the issue and the clarification made by our colleague from that the role of the external parties in this process. Again, I do insist because whether someone may think that it's difficult to envision today in the world as we see, but I do see this very particular issue, another, as I said, for test for our continental organization to deal with really crucial issues that bear not only on development, but on the human security in its very complex and dynamic understanding. And hopefully we'll be able to go through it. But the avenue, the path is very clear, is within the structure, the existing structures and mechanisms of our continental organization. That's what I have on this one.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Can I come to Dr. Yago, please? Professor Yago? Hello?
Yes, hello. I'm there, yeah, thank you. Yes, the first theory, if AU and Nile Basin Initiative work hand in hand, that would be very good indeed, you know. The only problem is that Egypt has withdrawn from NBI, unfortunately. So why did Egypt withdraw from NBI? Because 6 countries signed CFA, and CFA did not include the 1959 agreement as part of that document. So it would be good if Egypt is convinced to go back to the NBI folder, which is a very friendly, expertise-based and internationally supported and fully, you know, enthusiastically accepted by the basin countries. So it would be really good that if Egypt comes back to this folder. Now, whether the reference to 29 and 59 agreement is fair, that is a pertinent question. And in fact, that is the real snag in the entire negotiation. If it is not mentioned directly, but it is an underlining question and demand or understanding that Egypt wishes that these agreements to be taken into any content of the future agreement. And these, you know, 59 and 29 agreements are without any doubt and without, you know, any hesitation, have not been accepted by all upstream countries. I'm not sure about Sudan. Sudan is part of it, at least part of the 59 agreement. But Sudan is still in that agreement framework. But I don't know how strongly Sudan wants to be as part of the essential mechanism of that agreement. But other upstream countries are really against these agreements. In the first place, these agreements did not include upstream countries, and upstream countries were not consulted. And these agreements, especially the 1959 agreement, allocated the full amount of water resources, much part of it to Egypt and some part of it to Sudan. I don't want to go into the specific statistics, but nobody, in sane mind, nobody in responsible position of any of the countries can accept the total denial of the water resources, which it is legitimate, property or legitimate share of the upstream countries. I don't think this is a profitable thing to stay whether these agreements are valid or not. For upstream countries, it is out of question, and there cannot be any doubt that these agreements are acceptable. That is why CFA worked for 11 hard years to exclude the spirit and the letter of these agreements and to come up with a new, fresh agreement, which are based on equitable and reasonable management and use of the water resources in the basin. So I think that is all about these agreements. If you go to the legal references and validity, to diplomatic reference and validity of these agreements, we can take a much longer time to discuss about this, and we have a lot of references, commentaries written about this, including by Egyptians, actually. Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator.
That's very enlightening. Thank you very much indeed. Please, I deliberately kept you last because the question focuses on your comment. Therefore, I want to give you more time as well. It is not really being gender biased, but rather biased very positively.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I don't want to get into the question of whether or not the 59 agreement is fair or not, except really to say that I think we do need a basin-wide agreement. I think this is not an immediate. It's not going to be something that's going to be resolved immediately, but certainly, in the longer term, we do need to have an agreement that involves all 11 riparian states, and that sort of leads to the question about whether or not the AU and the Nile Basin Initiative should work together. Yes, but maybe not right now. I mean, I think that one of the things we really need to resolve in the next few months is around the filling of the period, having an agreement on the filling of the dam over the next few years. I mean, we've averted one diplomatic crisis, I think, this year, where with Ethiopia filling the GERD, we haven't seen the type of reaction that we were anticipating from Egypt and Sudan. But that doesn't mean that next year, when it comes to filling when it comes to storing the second tranche of water, that we're not going to end up with another diplomatic issue again. So, I think it's really important that the focus for the time being is on getting at least an agreement on the filling and operation during the filling period. And then I think once that's secured, you can begin exploring a basin-wide agreement with the Nile Basin Initiative. But for that to be effective, Egypt would need to rejoin. And at the moment, it's not minded to do so. So, yes, the AU should work with Nile Basin, but probably not just now. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. There is one question, then I'll invite the audience to speak just in their voice. Here, apart from the AU and the United Nations Security Council involvement, is it also possible that we might see International Court of Justice, ICJ, getting involved in the future at the invitation of one of the states? It's a quite interesting question indeed. Let me start with Professor Sidi Mohammed Omar Abdallah.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it's been said time and again that the preferred avenue for this complex issue is negotiations between the parties concerned. But I just comment very briefly on the role, the possible role of the International Court of Justice. As you may know, there are two ways to approach the ICJ in this issue. First of all is the contentious procedure, which will require consent by the parties concerned actually to go to the ICJ. And the second would be an advisory opinion on a legal issue, which will require resolution from the Security Council or the General Assembly, the two organs competent to request advisory opinion from the ICJ regarding a legal issue, being ICJ, as you know, the principal judicial body of the UN. But as you can see, and in view of what we've been talking about, the position of the two parties, at least two main parties in this, without, of course, excluding Sudan from this, but the very clear position of Ethiopia is that the United Nations organs have nothing to do with this. And if we follow the statement of their permanent representative to the United Nations in July, warning the Council that entertaining this issue, which was referred to by Egypt, will open Pandora box, because it's been highly politicized from the Ethiopia perspective, then of course you would have the procedural difficulty to engage the ICJ, either on the contentious procedure or the advisory opinion procedure. But we hope, and we remain hopeful, that there will be no need, because to seize the ICJ, you have to have actually a legal question that the ICJ will deal with, or a contention. But I don't think that Ethiopia will consent to the issue to refer to ICJ, within, of course, understanding its position of not to internationalize this issue. But again, as I said, we hope that we'll have enough confidence in our existing AU structures, that our brothers and sisters in both Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia will have more faith in the ability and capacity of our existing structures to give them, to create the framework within which they can operate, they can engage mutually for this, hopefully soon, comprehensive deal on this all outstanding issues.
Thank you so much indeed for that, James. Thank you for your question as well. And someone also saying that if we are discussing African solution, why should we involve ICJ at all? Because we also have been listening time and again how to refine the tools, the mechanisms, how we can also make African Union own it, not only lead it. But why should we at all involve this ICJ business? And so they just questioned me, and then I didn't answer. Simply, I wanted to roll the ball around. Before I move, let me come to Dr. Yacob, and then I'll finally take up again Liz. Yes, Dr. Yacob.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It's a good question. Many persons assume that ICJ would be one of the fora that this issue can be resolved or at least tested. I fully agree with Mr. Sidi Mohammed that it takes two to go to tango, as they say. There must be parties that take a case to an international court of justice. So I hope this will not be a dragging experience or experiment, again, to check an international body, to see a case. We should not go you know, to that level. I think it is right that there are about 280 transboundary rivers in the world. There may be even more. Nile is just one. ICJ or UN Security Council cannot, you know, take these cases, which can really take over the entire time of these organizations. So practically, this is arduous, and it is not really within their specific mandate and a possibility of, you know, attending these kind of cases. You know, the 3 countries now under negotiation are just good friends with long-standing diplomatic relations, a lot of cooperation between them, and you know, a lot of prospects that they can prosper together on the basis of the shared water resources. The best place, sorry, they can handle is in the forum of the 3 countries. If that is not possible, you know, to take it to the AU level, which is now really comfortably handling the case. Hope this will go through smoothly. So I don't think, you know, taking it to ICJ is useful, practical, and will be fruitful. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you so very much indeed. That squarely aligns with the very topic. And I must also thank James again for that very provocative question. Excellent question, actually, indeed. And I'm sure Liz is there, how this can also sit into international crisis group analysis as well. Is this internationalization aspect? Liz, this is your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Professor Jakob and Professor Sidi, you know, that we shouldn't be trying to internationalize this this issue. You know, with the AU is embarked on a mediation process, which, as you said before, is having some success. And certainly at this point, there is no recourse to go to the ICJ. And you know, we would hope, you know, that the best way to resolve this issue is going to be for the parties to remain negotiating. So, you know, we would hope at Crisis Group that we don't ever get to a point where, you know, relations have broken down so much that it needs to go to the ICJ. Thanks.
Thank you so much indeed. So let me just, before raising any question from here, let me listen to the audience. If they have any voice questions, can I come to Ambassador Matata if you have some comment or question to make? I see some of seniors, there are many people, to be honest. So just, yes, you can unmute. Yes, great.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor.
There should be some problem.
You want me to speak.
There is a problem with your mic, or?
Yeah, I know. Just leave it.
My apologies for the inconvenience then. I'm sorry for that, to be honest. And while others are also thinking of asking questions based on their voices, because I don't see the text here coming up, we have some 10 minutes like that. There is one question from Dejen Yamane. Don't you see that negotiation on GERD is a unilateral act, unilateral project of Ethiopia, is a blow to the people of sovereignty? I'm not very clear, but if you made sense of this, let me just repeat that. Don't you see that negotiating on GERD is a unilateral project of Ethiopia, is a blow to the people of sovereignty? Isn't it negotiating sovereignty? Why should even Ethiopia enter into such negotiation itself as long as it owns it all together? So I think that the spirit seems to be, I may be quite wrong, but let me come to the reflection of Liz and the rest. Let me start with my sister, Lisa Jobson.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer this very difficult question. I think, yes, Ethiopia has the right to develop GERD on the Nile, but according to international law, I mean, the Nile, the Blue Nile flows through, flows through Egypt and Sudan, and international law requires that upstream states do not cause considerable harm to the downstream states. Don't cause considerable harm to upstream states. So I think it's, whilst it is an Ethiopian project, the fact that it potentially can impact on other countries who are dependent on the Nile means that there needs to be an agreement on this. It's not, across many other river basins, we see the need to ensure that there is not significant harm done to downstream countries. So, I think it's essential that these negotiations take place, regardless of the fact that it is an Ethiopian project.
Excellent, excellent indeed, Liza. That for sure, this has a very interesting signal of power relations as well. If it were America or Great Britain, couldn't they own their own property and just make a dam rather than entering into any negotiation? So I think seems to be also a sort of power relation, power balance as well. So I think quite interesting one. If you want to just quickly.
Yeah, but I mean, Ethiopia is building the dam. Ethiopia is creating facts on the ground. The fact that we've seen, throughout this the whole sort of 10 years of when the GERD is being built, Ethiopia has gone ahead and built the dam. I mean, I don't think it's a question of the US or the UK. It's not applicable because we're an island. It's an island, but it's there are all countries should be subject to these concerns about upstream states. They are shared resources, even if they originate in one particular country, and the resources need to be shared in an equitable way, in a way that benefits all countries and doesn't cause a problem for any of the countries engaged. So I think whether it was the US or whether it was China, I think China has its own issues around rivers and river basins, and this is probably one of the reasons why it's been quite quiet on this issue. But that all countries are subject or should be subject to these strictures in terms of how you engage and how you can use water and the effects that it has on the upstream countries.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Of course, he added more points there, and I wouldn't enter into that. Let me come to Dr. Yago. Dr. Yago, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Thank
Excellent.
you.
So let me make a question full. He says, but Egypt and Sudan never negotiated while they were making their own. But they never negotiated with Ethiopia. Ethiopia has never been consulted on Aswan Dam, and so why should Ethiopia consult others? This is what he's saying. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a very good question. This is a classical question also. It is, it has been bad practice in the Nile Basin that the downstream countries developed their water resources unilaterally without consulting upstream countries. That would have been good, but there were no frameworks at the time when they developed their dams and other water projects. But Ethiopia has also been developing her own projects, within the Ethiopian territory. The Fincha Dam and the Sugar State and hydropower project there, Anabeles, as you remember, producing 400 megawatts of electricity and having a lot of irrigation down the power project. Takaze is another one, and also Abobo Dam in Baro Akobo. So all these dams and water projects have been developed in Ethiopia without any seeking permission or consent from Egypt or Sudan. If there were frameworks, if there were common agreements, each country would have been cooperated, each country would have been consulted, what kind of project in which country, for what purpose, and for what shared benefits. And this tradition has not been there in the Nile Basin. So Ethiopia has a sovereign right to develop her water resources within the Ethiopian territory. And this is in tune with the 1997 UN Convention on Transboundary Water Use. And this is also in line with the principles articulated in the Operative Framework Agreement, which was negotiated between 9 countries, although Egypt and Sudan withdrew later on. This is also in tune with the 2015 Declaration of Principles Agreement. So as long as countries keep to the principles of equitable and reasonable utilization, and as long as countries really take care of not causing significant harm to other countries, I think they have absolute right to develop the water resources within their territories. But the question of equitable and reasonable utilization and not causing significant harm is because the water resources are shared. And when they are shared, this is the principle countries have to follow. The mistakes that have been made in the past, especially with regards to downstream countries, not giving any attention, not paying any empathy to upstream countries, will change, I hope, in the future. Because the future agenda is going to be not only to fight or to litigate or to negotiate on single project, but it is going to be laid out for the basin-wide development in every stretch and in every segment and every branch of the Nile waters. So this will be what we are looking for in the future. That makes sense because all countries will benefit to the fullest level of the utilization with protection and conservation, of course. So I think the question is quite right, that Egypt and Sudan should have really consulted Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, DRC for their own projects. That practice was not good practice, but in the future is going to happen. But for now, Ethiopia is quite, within the framework of international, conventional understanding and, principles that on transboundary water resources, there must be transparency and there must be assurance that there will not be significant harm on the other side, while on the territory, the country, in this case Ethiopia, can develop not only one project, but so many other projects, like she has been developing several projects in the past. So I think this is the way we can understand this problem. This is not a clear-cut case that each country should be in the same line, but historical that was not correct, and it was not right also. But in the future, this will be corrected to come to the basic principle of equitable and reasonable utilization. Yes.
Absolutely great. Thank you so very much indeed. If there is anything to be added, I see Professor Ambassador Matata just, and he seems to be, are you ready? Okay.
I'm trying.
Sorry for that. Okay. If Professor Sidi doesn't have any point you'd like to add, Professor? If not, I'm just, yes, Prof.
Just very quick, on this last point of people's sovereignty, what we understand, the passionate commitment of all these attachment of all these parties involved with the classic notion of sovereignty, and they're suffering their territory so they can do whatever it is. This is another debate. And no wonder that the issue has been framed by all parties concerned as something that has to do with vital national interests. But I hope, I think we all hope that also the principles of Pan-Africanism and African solidarity will prevail in dealing with this, beyond the classic notion of sovereignty and vital national interests. Thank you.
Thank you so very much indeed. As you can see, almost because we start exactly on time, we should also stop exactly on time. We've got 3 minutes. So before I say thank you and goodbye, I want to finally ask very hypothetical question to the distinguished finest minds of Africa here. If you were invited to the Prime Minister of Ethiopia or to Minister of Foreign Affairs to advise on the next round of discussion, what one point would you just give them? Each of you 30 seconds. Just one point that they should add into the negotiation process. One, even two can be also possible.
Can I come in?
Yes. Is my question clear? Okay, Professor.
Yes. I think the next process of discussion will focus only on the filling and operation of Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, not anything else, not on the future development of the water resources upstream of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, because that is very difficult to achieve, and that should be understood within the general framework of the Nile Basin between all 11 countries. And that is a big area to go to later on. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Professor Sidi, please?
Yes, just my only piece of advice, humble piece of advice, is for them to make the best use of the AU existing structures, because it is the framework for both of them, the three parties, to move on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. Liz?
Okay, I mean, I think my message, not just to Prime Minister Abiy, but to President Sisi and to the Prime Minister Hamdok, is to realize that all sides are going to have to make compromises. If there's going to be an agreement, you know, all three countries are going to have to live with things that they would prefer not to. You know, we need to see a move away from maximalist positions and move towards a mood of compromise.
I can't, honestly speaking, thank you enough for such wonderful contribution and extremely interesting and enlightening engagement. I'm sure this is not the end, but it's just simply the beginning of some of the processes for us. In the future, we are going to again have you back. I wish it were in Ethiopia, so that in face-to-face, so that we could have Ethiopian coffee here and lunch together. I'll compensate, I promise for that, after this coronavirus is over. So thank you very much. This is thank you so much, the audience. Shall we just give them applause? 1, 2, 3 round of applause. 1, 2, 3 for these excellent speakers. If you can do that wherever you are. Thank you so much indeed. God bless you abundantly.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Mm.